A very good evening to all the participants who've joined into this broadcast. A very special guest, a man who needs no introduction, is my guest this evening to talk not just about how investing is as a science, but more how it is about the person, how it could possibly be an art, and what potential angles can spirituality or understanding oneself lend to the world of investing. Mr. Vallabh Bhanshali, the co-founder of ENAM. And generally, when I introduce my guests, I don't read out from an introduction, but it's such an eminent personality. So I actually written down a few things of his accomplishments. So I'll just read them out before I get him into the show. Apart from, of course, being the co-founder of ENAM, he is also the founder and chief mentor of Desh Apnaye Sahyog Foundation. He is also the president at FJEI, which is the Federation of Jain Educational Institutes. He is also the founder and the co-founder of Satya Vigyan Foundation, also one of the co-founders of Flame University. He's also been a brief anchor at some point in his career, anchoring a show called Kaun Hai Bharat Ka Bhagya Vidhata. And of course, he's had the good fortune. In fact, I should say the companies have had the good fortune of working with him, right from Reliance to Sterlite, Marico, Z, SR, the list is quite endless, and he's brought so many companies into the public forum, including Infosys. So, Mr. Bhanshali, pleasure to be speaking with you. A very warm welcome. Thank you so much for extending your time to us today. I'm speaking to you after almost 10 years in this format, so it's a pleasure to be interacting with you. I wanted to start off with the first sort of broad question I had, and maybe that would encompass a lot of things that is sort of, we are surrounded by as on today. We're all working from home, and everyone feels that, they've started working a lot more than they were probably working from when they were in office. And I've sort of been thinking about this issue of productivity versus activity. Is it just about the quantum of work you do or how productive it is, and how you approach becoming more productive in an environment like this? How do you analyze the situation we're in, sir? And what do you think are the dynamics that can come to play to increase productivity when one's looking to maximize oneself from working from home?
Thank you, Rahul. A few very important preliminaries for me that as I'm on a Nirmal Bang show, my mind is full of Nirmal ji, and I want to pay my homage to his memory, to his amazing sense of enterprise, hard work. What a friend he was. He was a friend to everybody, and his giving attitude. And so I know his journey for a long time, and he will be an inspiration. And I also want to mention Dilip ji and Kishore ji for being a part of that same journey, and a very important second part of the journey. And I think whether it is too well known or not, it doesn't matter to me, but it is very significant for me to mention that in that 2001 crisis, there are several firms and entities that got into all kinds of shadow and difficulty. There's only one name which came back with its name, reputation intact, which was Nirmal Bang. And I think what a fantastic role Dilip ji, Kishore ji played, and what an account they gave of themselves. And Rahul, of course, I have very fond memories of you, from your young days. I was already thinking of retiring when you were joining the profession of journalism, but I always thought of you very fondly. Coming back to your question, which is very linked very much to, the very funny title that we have chosen for this, which sounds like, using a furnace for making ice cream kind of thing, the spirituality and investment. But, how it all comes together. You said, how do you become, a lot of people have become more productive, but how do you become more productive with this? So first of all, acceptance of reality is half the battle won when you accept the reality. So lockdown is nobody's fault. It's a reality. It is very difficult to say whether there should have been lockdown or no lockdown. So once you have a lockdown, which is a law, which is commonsensical, how do you accept it? The moment you accept it, your mind starts seeing different possibilities. There are things that you've never done in life. There are new skills, there are new relationships, there are new discoveries to be made about yourself, which itself creates positive energy. So nothing gets done until you have positive energy to move, to progress in life. And therefore, I think all those who adopted, who accepted the lockdown, they have amazing stories to tell. There's some right from that, oh, I discovered parts of house which I had not discovered for several years. I never visited them. I discovered, I found things, I found relationships and so on. I find I just don't have enough time. I'm struggling. The moment I get up, I have a long list of things, and I just completely get exhausted when I go to bed. So it's been fantastic, and it's also been fantastic for several people, not for all. So I think acceptance is the most magical thing.
You said in your opening remarks that you were thinking of retiring when I had just started my career in journalism. And you seem to have just gotten more vibrant and younger since that. I mean, I've known you for about 15 years now. Uh, how has this journey been? I mean, how have you managed to keep yourself motivated? How do you divide your time? I mean, I've been listening to some of your speeches that you have given on the spiritual front as well. There are only 24 hours in a day. And how do you bifurcate your time and find things to do other, just beyond the world of investing and investment banking and broking that you're known for? And how has that last 15-year block been for you in that regard?
So I must correct myself that I shouldn't have said retired. I wanted to do new things. So I wanted to, I had career changes in my life even earlier. And so I thought that, well, if I finished exploring something, it starts kind of boring me, because more of the same thing doesn't mean much to me. Life has different meaning for me, etc. So I wanted to explore a lot of other things. So, I had the same youthful or even, if you will, childlike curiosity about other areas of life. And so whether it was my spiritual journey, it's a very pompous word, spiritual journey, but it's just the commonsensical approach to, knowing more about yourself. That's what spiritualism is. So I wanted to do that. I also wanted to see what impact that we can make on the community, which has been so, generous and so giving to me. So I wanted to do that. I also wanted to explore, a couple of these ideas that Desh Apnaye Foundation. And since you introduced me through that, let me just say a couple of lines that, if we are taking a boat ride or a train ride or a plane ride, and if the train, boat, or the plane are in trouble, what do? You worry about the plane or you worry about your luggage? I think when we live in this country, we are all worrying about our luggage rather than worrying about our country. And that Desh Apnaye Foundation, that guys, look at where we are. What is our potential? What's our history? What is the potential of our sciences, individuals, from Narayan Murthy to so many of them? What was the huge potential? What have we done about it? Because we don't think about the country. So it's a whole movement, if you will, to make people say, so Desh Apnaye. I mean, if you had any common sense and you wanted to think of your future, you would do something about the country. Similarly, Satya Vigyan Foundation and other associations, education. So there are several education causes that I'm associated with. And one of them is a particularly brilliant one, which I'm working with, with an NGO where I'm deeply involved, where we created, or, the NGO created, and I'm only a late joinee there, but been supporting it actively, is on value education, for example. It's very related to the talk that we're doing. That if we didn't have values, right? Every day in the capital market, one thing that disappoints us the most is that, this guy cheated, or, this broker did this, or this company did this, and so on and so forth. We don't have values. What is the use of brilliance? So this is the most successful value education program created in the history of education, and probably the biggest revolutionary step, that in 4 years' time, this program has been taken most successfully to 67,000 government schools of Maharashtra, and now is going to other states. And the schools and the children and the parents and the teachers can't have enough about it. So there were so many things to explore in life. So my day is, every day is a new priority, whatever comes about. So I have been very lucky. I've done, I don't know how many different things in the last 10 years. I've been a very, very privileged person.
Vallabhji, how do you keep yourself so humble? I mean, for all the time that I have known you, the people that have known you, I have worked with Nirmal Bang for 10 years. I've interacted with the promoters and I see the respect they have for you. Uh, humility is such a rare trait to find for someone who's accomplished as much as you have. And if I'm not mistaken, you even named your son after humility. And, how do you how do you do it? I mean, it's just, I read once Rahul Arora said that, common sense is the most uncommon thing. And humility is something that everyone should be practicing, but it is not a common trait. And you're pretty much at the top of the game in everything that you've done. How do you manage to do it? Keep your feet on the ground.
Rahul, I remember to look at the sky every day. And I just see the enormity of, the universe around me. Every day I remember that there's no sphere of life where without the help of, million people, anything would have happened in my life. I just can't count my blessings enough. So I just find it, rather pompous to use the word humble for any of these things. I think it is just being most commonsensical. And, it begins with acceptance, just recognize, how things happen. And if you were that smart as the world would want you to, think of that you're so accomplished, then everything that I would do would result in 10 on 10. No, why doesn't it happen? Very simple. It doesn't happen. If it doesn't happen, then there is a lot that goes into anything that happens anywhere near perfection. So give credit to all those things. And you only to get better. You recognize those factors and therefore you try and make those factors available to you better. That, I think we're going to talk a little about it, hopefully, as we go along, that how it's important to recognize various confluencing factors that are constantly at work. The more you're aware of them, obviously you think less seriously about yourself, but you become a better manager that, I better have all these streams come together if I want the result. If I want my cake to taste the way it should, I need everything to be perfect.
Why don't you elaborate on that, sir, while we're at it? Because, there are so many emotions, especially even in the world of investing. I mean, if you go back to the 1987 movie Wall Street, where Michael Douglas made that famous, or rather should I say infamous, speech about greed is good. And then there have been, people who've written reports over and over about the fear when things are not going right, and, the sense of greed when things are going right for you. Sthir buddhi jise bolte hain. How do you keep that focus? And, when you have all these conflicting emotions in your mind, especially when you're in as dynamic a field as the stock market?
Yeah. So, when I accepted this spirituality and investment theme, almost the next moment, clarity emerged in my mind that, of course, that what we call spirituality is so deeply connected, or it deeply reflects in what we call investments and investment management. I think that's a subtle thing, but it reflects equally in investment management. So when we say spirituality, so, forget all those lovely images of man sitting under a tree or someone pretending to be this or that, etc. So my teacher, I have had the good luck to have many, many teachers. One of my greatest spiritual teacher, Acharya Goenka-ji, he sums it up very beautifully. He says, Panchashil palan karo, devdan dil khol, karo sadhana bhavana, shuddha dharma anmol. So he's not talking about Buddhism or Jainism or any of that ism. Shuddha dharma means law of nature, the most commonsensical, most all-encompassing way of living. He says only 4 things. That's spirituality. Panchashila palan karo. Panchashila is the governance. That, you follow this governance. And karo sadhana bhavana. What is sadhana? Sadhana is what you mentioned, steadiness. And why steadiness? So just think about it. If your camera is moving, do you make a perfect image? You want a steady hand, isn't it? So simply, I think Indian sages gave this principle, gave this insight to the world many years, hundreds of years ago, Sthirtam Darsha Ishyati. That you want the truth to reveal, first learn to be steady. So that's why we call it Sthir Sukham Asanam. That, first discover an asana in which you can sit steadily. So in anything that you do, unless you learn to be steady, you don't get a vision. Vision is what you see, what will result. You're not trying to see something, vision happens to you. And it happens to you when you start becoming steady. So I think once you recognize that if you don't do Panchashil, if I'm involved in any of this stuff, and Panchashil is also very simply stated, if I were to take it to the next level, it's a governance, right? You would not invest in any company if it did not have good governance. You would not give your money to any fund manager unless it had good governance. And what the hell, this pompous word, good governance, we make a living by, becoming governance experts and so on. But governance is nothing but sensitivity. Am I sensitive to, creatures around me, to my community around me? When I say I won't steal, the word in Indian scriptures for stealing, they don't say not stealing. It's called adattadana. That means you don't take anything unless someone has given it to you. Which means you can't pick up something from the street. You can't pluck a flower or a fruit from a tree, but nobody gave it to you. You need permission. So, if you start thinking of Panchashil governance in that manner, you're fantastic. Take a business. If you're sensitive, and how brilliantly you will do if you're sensitive. When you are naturally sensitive to, all these people around you, you think of 6 constituencies. So first you think of supplier, right? Because suppliers begin, supplier of capital. So my shareholder, my friends and family who gave me capital, my borrower, someone who gives me something to start. Do I give the best deal to the man? Do I make him chase me for payment, etc., etc.? So if I start my sensitivity to supplier, I'll be super sensitive to my customer. It cannot be otherwise. I want to do something for customer to make a profit, but if I've left my supplier in the lurch, when comes Corona times, things will be very difficult. Today, what is happening to supply chains around the world, just reflect and you'll understand what I'm saying. So also whether it is supplier, is the first employee is the next supplier to me. They supply the services that makes my business go. My community. I never think of the community from which my employee, my supplier, my customer, all of them come from community. I never just think of community as a constituencies. My environment in which I function, the air I breathe and so on and so forth, I don't think about it. Those companies and individuals who think of these 4, customer and government come last. Now, any company which is not sensitive to all 6 of them will get into trouble sooner or later. If a telecom company didn't pay attention to government, its very existence can come into difficulty. And let me give you an example of someone who is very conscious of this balance, right? So DMart, unfortunately, is much used example, but it's a brilliant one. So let me just say, the balance between supplier, customer, and employee. You see a brilliant example in DMart. It started with his huge capability to deal with the supplier because he understood buying, but he also understood that, these poor fellows have to, chase for payments. I can do it the other way around, that I will give all the money that they want. But he created an advantage. Now, if I exploit that advantage and I do not pass on the same advantage to my customer, it can be a very different situation. But he passed on the same advantage to the customer. So by thinking uniformly, and so also employee, that look, I have great insight about the retail business, but I can't run the operations. So he created a perfect deal with his employees too. And when you are balanced in this manner, to someone like Radhakishanji, the government and the community and all are a very large part of his existence and thinking. So you see an example of someone who balanced this. Now, just as you will find someone truly spiritual, rare to find, these commonsensical principles, when applied to a business, they become magical. They become Lollapalooza. You know Lollapalooza. Do you know Lollapalooza?
I've heard,
Does your audience know Lollapalooza?
well, I'm going to have to take a poll on that separately, sir. I'm familiar with the concept. Vaguely, I must say.
Yeah. So Lollapalooza is this word given to us by, popularized by great Charlie Munger Saab. And he said that any system which has accumulated lot of these small advantages becomes a Lollapalooza. It becomes unbeatable. It becomes like the wish tree. Whatever you'll ask, it'll do. So this sensitivity itself, so take another example. Take HDFC. It's an unsung hero, or not sung enough. One culture started by H.T. Parekh and then sustained by Deepak Parekh and his colleagues over the last 40 years or 50 years of, being very sensitive to all the constituencies. It has given us so many companies, such fantastic reward shareholders have had. If you just studied HDFC very closely, their offices will be simple offices. Their employees will not be the most sparkling, dazzling, coming from this university, that university. They don't dazzle. They're very simple, understated people. If you look at their, consciousness of supplier, their suppliers are all capital people. They want to keep those suppliers so comfortable. They will always have large amounts of cash as liquidity. Now, you might be in the lending business. I'm tempted to lend the last dollar. They resist that temptation. And therefore, whenever the norms change, HDFC, they say, yeah, we have enough cash to give you. Now, Bajaj Finance is following, some of the other finance companies are following that model. No, let's keep enough liquidity. Berkshire Hathaway, of course, is the ultimate that we are in insurance business. Therefore, they keep large amounts of cash. We think, these chaps are stupid, but they say, no, it doesn't matter. That if there is a flood once in 85 years, only surviving the flood matters, nothing else matters. So I think this thinking of sensitivity to all the six constituencies is an enormous thing for being very, very successful business. Those who have not looked at environment, those who have not looked at community, there are examples and examples. And therefore, once you sift all of these, that it's my problem, you get a handful of companies. It's so easy. It's so easy, Rahul, to invest in those companies. It doesn't matter what price it is.
Sir, it goes back to another point that Rahul Dravid had made, and pardon me for constantly bringing up his example because I've read a lot about him. He said,
it bears your name, Rahul.
Well, at least one other name, naam that I can be proud of, I'll say. But, he said it's very easy to play a game where you can go out and hit sixes. It's very difficult to defend the ball all day because that has an art of its own. But I'm very tempted. I'm trying to frame my next question in light with the theme that we have chosen. Because you brought up Radhakishanji and the model of DMART, I'm trying to think as a fund manager here. And when I look at a business like this, how do I decide if I'm paying too much for something like a DMART? I don't want this to sound like a stock market question. I'm just trying to connect it to the theme that we are in. Are you betting more on the man and the franchise that he has created and he will continue to create, because businesses will always have their ups and downs? So, this goes back to the issue that we were discussing earlier, where a fund manager can have this conflict in his mind when he or she is paying for a particular company as to whether I am paying too much at one point in time. How do you address that dilemma?
So, if I now come to the second point from sensitivity to steadiness, how do you know someone's steady? You will find three qualities in that person. You will find that person is humble, recognizing that, look, things just don't happen because I got all the smarts. There are many things. So I can be very smart in absolute sense, but when it comes to application smartness, there are no single factor can do it all. So there are always multiple factors. So that makes that person humble. The second person will be, the moment you're humble, there's a sense of contentment that unless all these factors align, nothing can happen. And as and when they happen, they will happen. But in the meantime, I need to accept my reality and be contented. It's amazing that people who practice those two qualities, they develop a third quality without trying, and that's courage. Being contented in this world, today's world, is also requires courage. Switzerland will say we will grow at 1% and that's okay. And Estonia will go down, from 9% to 4%, and they'll say it's okay. Even to negative growth, they will say, okay, you need that courage. So the moment you have these three qualities, you get to the next set of qualities, bhavana, which is to exert. Bhavana means to bhav, to happen, to create again and again. That's why we say swabhav, ye mera acha bhav, ye bura bhav, etc., etc. So kare sadhana bhavana. So the bhavana, when it comes to exertion, when I have these three qualities, I see things that, this is worth doing, this is not worth doing. Radhakishanji Damani would have paid whatever for the liquor companies and the consumer companies and the cigarette companies, whatever, etc. But he didn't want to remain a stockbroker forever, right? Mm-hmm. So he said, okay, let me take an Apna Bazaar franchise. You'll see these three qualities in the person. So he had the courage to go and start in. I'm just continuing with DMart because, we started talking it. We can take many, many examples. Then you want to strike your own path. So also this is linked to the question that, do I buy DMart? No, I don't have to buy DMart. What does my courage, what is my conviction, what does my vision say? And I want to follow that vision. Everyone has bought DMart. I don't have to buy DMart. It's okay if I missed out on DMart. I'll get another DMart. And I'll give you an example. Take Warren Buffett Saab's Berkshire Hathaway, right? So last several years, I don't know, 6, 7 years or whatever, etc. They were underperforming the market, and people, in a very haughty manner, kind of said that, look, technology nahi samajhte, jamana technology ka hai, to buddhe log reh gaye. So they are contented, they are humble. They said, yeah, maybe, but we are sensitive to all our people, we are transparent, so on and so forth. They carry on. Few years back, they recognized Apple. They said all these technology companies, we didn't understand that technology was one part. We didn't understand that their business model was the second part. Apple was a business whose model they understood. Mm-hmm. That these people have the most transparent business model amongst all the technology companies. They are not giving you something free and hiding, where the profit will come from. They are not hoping to get advertisement and getting data and cheating on that or that, etc. It is all very straightforward in your face. So they understood that model. They thought this is the greatest company. And they bought and bought and bought. Had they not bought Apple, their underperformance would have been huge. So they are happy keeping the cash. They're relatively underperforming, but not that bad. So when you have that conviction, clarity, you will get one idea, which will be your next DMart. But if you follow the crowd, because everyone is talking about that stock, somebody asks me a question and I get flummoxed and say, no, you buy DMart at whatever price. You don't have to, you have to follow. So therefore, the next quality that comes, that courage gives you independence. Rahul, there's something interesting but I want to force on you. You talked about investment manager. Mm-hmm. Very few investors think of themselves as investment managers, and they make a huge mistake if they don't do that. Because what happens? How do I know how well I'm performing? I just remember, I bought this and I sold this, etc., etc. And I remember my wins much more than my losses, my misses. It's only when I said that whatever I got in my life, whether I got intelligence, whether I got physical capability, other possessions, a business, I have to think of myself as a manager, as a trustee. That's when I'll start becoming better and better, because, I'll become more sensitive and I'll perform better. Even my own capital, I have no right to destroy that capital, getting 5%, 6%, 7% return. I must try and optimize. And therefore, if I say that I flip myself from an investor to investment manager, so I start looking at those qualities. Independence of a fund manager is the quality number one. If you're not independent minded, why give money to you? I'll buy an index fund, isn't it? And let me tell you one more story here. I don't know, you heard of Charlie Ellis, Charlie Munger Saab and Charlie Ellis. Charlie Ellis is a celebrated investment guru in the Western world. And he was on the chairman of the investment committee of Yale Endowment, the most successful endowment fund, one of the most brilliant investors in the world. And they don't manage their money. All their money is managed by several fund managers. If they hear good things about Rahul, they'll come 10,000 miles and investigate all about you and not worry about your unknown, your small. So this man is quality. And they will do research on you, on your character and on your independence. And if they hear 1,000 stories about you and one of them says that there was a character flaw, that this man bribed a policeman, they will not give you the money. But if your performance was not fantastic, but your attitude was, they'll give you the money. So Charlie Ellis talks a lot about independence and character. So when I'm managing my own money, I must question myself, how independent I am, what sort of character I have. Then I deserve my wealth. That's when it becomes a lollapalooza. It lasts and lasts and lasts.
Balaji, I'm trying to think if someone actually came and investigated an Indian fund manager to that extent, and if bribing a police officer was one of the things that was a negative tick mark, a lot of people would fall off, I would assume, in that checklist.
But then you don't become a Yale endowment fund, right?
That's true.
They work so hard. They work
That's
so
amazing.
hard. Yeah. And when can you work hard, Rahul? When can you work this hard, right? So you would think that, they are not practical people. How can they'll never find an investment manager in India? It's okay. Yet they find so many people in the world who have done fantastic things for them. No, so we don't think because it is difficult for us, we think it is difficult for everybody. It is not possible. That's why you miss out on D-Marts, because can somebody build a business like that? Somebody may be building a next D-Mart, but we won't even believe in it. You cannot work hard unless you believe in your vision.
Right.
Then you have no problem putting in 16 hours a day and still smiling and still not growing old.
Well, that I can see in you. That I can see.
So I think, being humble, being contented, how large part are they? That's why, Berkshire Hathaway can go on, Buffett Saab can live in the same house for 40, 50 years, and Munger Saab can do the same, and all those things happen. The magic lies in those 2-3 qualities. And then, it just translates and they have no problem. They can wait endlessly.
Sir, in the Bhagavad Gita, which is basically the summation of what Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna in the middle of the battlefield, there are a couple of things that he tells him. One is, Karam Karo, the outcome of the war is not in your hand. And another aspect which I'll just sort of look to paraphrase is, ambition is not a bad thing. But sometimes people forget how far they have come in their quest to where they want to go. And that leads to a little more anxiety than it should. Sometimes you should just take a step back and reflect on what you have actually accomplished instead of being in this perpetual mode of wanting to achieve more. I'm sure you've seen enough and more of this when you've dealt with professionals and companies through your career. What is your thought process on this?
I think it's again, just recognize your reality, man. That humility. Who are you to become too ambitious? No one in the world has been like that. So you recognize that constantly things happen. Take leverage, for example. Someone who doesn't understand leverage, that you can use a lever, right? Literally, right. That you can use a lever or a gear or any of the scientific principles to achieve amazing things, right? Someone who doesn't understand them thinks that this is all magic. Someone who understands them, calculates mathematically, and he does not think I'm a genius. He thinks that, no, the science is the genius. These are the principles to follow. The results follow. So I think he thinks like that. So there's no ambition. That personally I can do anything, it just goes out. So you get 2 approaches. You get an excuse to do something wrong, or you get an excuse not to do something, right? I got an excuse that this is difficult, therefore I bribed the policeman. You'll think like that. When you come out of that, there is no excuse. That's when you start moving towards excellence. When you start moving towards excellence, you move away from personal ambition to excellence. So Gita also says, which a lot of people don't know as well, a lot of people know, but not as well, is yoga karmasu kaushalam. Kaushalya, excellence in your work is yoga. So yoga has a lot of definitions in Gita. Yeah, so samattam yoga uchyate, that how being steady and equanimous is yoga. So there are various definitions. So I think this doing my deed is not a stray deed, right? He's telling only Arjun to wage a war. He's not telling everyone to wage a war. Mm-hmm. So he's telling Arjun, because you are a warrior, you were trained to be a warrior, your blood is warrior, your situation is a warrior, and you're moving away from it. Excuse, right? He's giving all excuses. And that's what the Lord is now telling him. Come out of excuse. And he shows him the reality, right? So he shows him his own Virat group. He gives him all the other arguments. He studies. Arjun is a beautiful, I think those who want to read Gita, and many versions of Gita, there are many brilliant versions. One of the, I think the most brilliant is one by Vinoba Bhave. It's called Gita Pravchar. It's a great story behind that book also. So if you read, and he says, Arjun, right? The word Arjun comes from the root in Sanskrit called Riju. Riju means something which is straight, which is humble. There is no angularity in it. So in Gita, he says only Arjun could have understood Bhagwan's knowledge, right? In the Mahabharata scene is that Bhishma saying, I want to hear two words. What is the Lord saying? You cannot hear. You don't have the same humility as Arjun. Arjun had the humility to say, I am feeling so scared. The world thinks he's the greatest warrior, but he says, I'm feeling so scared. I think it's a beautiful story in which ambition is out of question. It begins with humility, ends with excellence. Ambition is a stupid thing. So you recognize what I'm built for, right? As I told you that what you've got, you're a trustee of it. Once you recognize, you want to use all of it and give back.
So can you talk a little bit about failures and how to deal with them? Maybe some things that you tried your hands in that you didn't, sort of have the desired result on. Managements that you may have interacted with that may have, you use the word leverage, just taken a few bad decisions and pegged them back a little bit, and what they learned, and how you sort of advise them to come back. So both at a personal and a professional level, through the failures you have seen other people or some of the instances you have gone through in your career, what you've learned from it, how you've come out of it.
So next time you invite me to a day-long session on my failures, because I won't be able to deal with them in a short period. And large number of failures on a daily basis. But if I take my what I try and do as myself, then I have a problem. But if I say that, in this universe, millions of processes are going on, I'm a part of one of those, I failed in somewhat. So I get up and attempt the next thing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter whether the world knows me, the world doesn't know me. My reputation is X or my reputation is Y. I put my nose to the grindstone and just keep grinding. This is what I'm here for. Nature has asked me to grind this mill, and that's what I keep grinding. And that's about it. So what is the big thing about failure? The rains don't always happen in the same way. The sun doesn't shine always in the same way. Is it a failure? There is a grand design in which things keep happening. So I don't give myself an excuse not to make an effort. Because, when I say I failed in something, somehow I want to blame somebody or something else or, some part of me and ignore the rest of the reality. Oh, there are many other realities. Just accept and move on. So those people who accept failures easily, they have a chance to move on. Take Corona, right? Let's say at the independence, that was a very big moment, right? when India became independent, suddenly those who were the friends of British, they became lesser people, the Rai Bahadurs, etc., etc. Suddenly there was no benefactor and who would give them grants and all, and there you had to fight. Take 1991, suddenly we had economic reforms, and things changed. Different set of people came forward. Now, when something like this happens, either you form a Bombay club, that some problem ho gaya, let us fight reforms. Let's try and block all these open, open general license, and you can import technology and so on. Or you say, oh, times have changed. So failure is like this. Oh, something changed. I learned something new. Mm-hmm. And it's fantastic. You move on. So if you take yourself too seriously, you will take your failure seriously. You take yourself not that seriously, failure are there to teach you only. Very easy.
Mm-hmm. Any
So you were said that, when we talked about companies, etc. So, right. I think those who forget the principle of sensitivity, that I have to service all 6 people, my banker included, my government included, my community included, they are bound to get into difficulties sooner or later. So it begins with Panchashila Palan Karo. I think the most important thing is, you didn't become big, doesn't matter. You kept your reputation intact. You never know when you will get the next vision and you will become very big. And there are the corporate history, business history is replete that something survived for 100, like Nokia, right? You know the Nokia story. Nokia was a 135-year-old company. It was a tire and rubber chemicals and whatnot. It went through so many transformations. And they hit upon the telecom and they became a super duper large company. They became a large percentage of Finland's GDP. So just surviving, accepting your failures, remaining humble, you got a huge opportunity.
The one thing I've learned, given the example that you cited, Vallabhji, and even looking at companies like, say, a BlackBerry or a Kodak, is that change is permanent and you can't take anything for granted in an ever-evolving world, that's for sure. Simplistically put, when you look at somebody's career, success is something that somebody else defines for you. Satisfaction is something that you get from within. But yet I see that people want to chase external adulation more than get self-satisfaction. Now, you have done Vipassana, you are big on yoga, and that probably has obviously helped you a lot in developing, getting you into who you are today. When you look at people trying to seek external validation vis-a-vis trying to, as we discussed earlier also in this conversation, trying to get themselves still, how do you advise them? And, I have a follow-up to that, but specifically on this part of trying to seek adulation for your success vis-a-vis just getting internal satisfaction.
I think, see, this external adulation has been there from our childhood days. We start, with the adulation of our parents and people around us. Shabash beta, it's magic to the child. The applause, we clap even when the child is not learned to walk or learn to talk or whatever, etc. So this adulation is very deeply ingrained in us. It starts getting diluted when you start getting satisfaction from within. It's being steady. Steadiness does wonderful things for you. You just feel happy by yourself. So I think one has to discover, when people say, oh, this person has had a spiritual experience, this spiritual experience is nothing but discovering an equilibrium within. That, oh, there is a very place which gives happiness, quiet, love, joy, goodwill. What we say, it comes up like a fountain from within. As that grows, you are not that bothered about, what the other adulation is. But it's something which is hard to, give up completely. But as you become more steady, I think that the answer lies in Sthirtam Darsheshyati. So the beautiful couplet or Sanskrit shloka, which I would like to quote. It says that there's this extraordinary book called Jnanasar. So those who are interested, maybe 0.001% of audience may be interested, written by a Jain monk, very open-minded monk. He says, Vatsakim Chanchala Swanto. He said, why are you so bothered about, this and that, etc., and running in all the directions? The treasure within, just learn to be steady, just try and... So once you've sighted the treasure, boss, मेरे घर के अंदर मैंने देखा यार, मेरे को I got one gold coin. I think there must be hundreds of gold coins. Where will you go? Will you go out or you'll go inside? So that getting that first gold coin from within starts changing things.
It's interesting. I can sort of relate this to a WhatsApp forward I had got recently, and I don't know from where it germinated, but it was a very, very nice forward. It said, uh, do you have a problem? Yes or no? And it said, if yes, can you do something about it? And then again, it goes into a yes or no. So do you have a problem? If you don't have a problem, you don't need to worry. If you have a problem, can you do something about it or can you not do something about it? If you can't do something about it, why worry? If you can do something about it, again, then why worry? So effectively, it all came down to why worry? Just continue to be, just continue to do what you are good at doing and just continue at that. I mean, I don't know if I made sense, but it was just trying to drive home a point that we try to overanalyze things sometimes instead of just keeping them very simple.
So Rahul, not to labor the point, but really to be, if this knowledge is to be practical, to be useful, we have to see that all these things are contained in management books, right? About governance is contained in rule books and stories or WhatsApp forwards. WhatsApp forwards are the most amazing knowledge, repository of knowledge. Everything you want in the world is there in the WhatsApp forward. But why doesn't life change? It doesn't change for two reasons. Because out of the four things I said, Panchashil Palan Karo, Deya Dan Dil Khol, Karo Sadhana Bhavana. I think this exerting on becoming steady, it requires hard work, dedicated work. Mangar Sahib talks about it, that those who are so fond of, hanging out with every group, including WhatsApp groups, forget it, anything will happen to them. Unless they learn to say, hell with you, and to be with what you have determined to be the right thing, if things don't happen. So, companies that have gone on for hundreds of years, take a company like Nestle, right? We talk about core competence and keeping the business mood. Now, all of us, Rahul, you got a good job. I did well for a while according to the world standards. But we can't keep it forever. To keep it forever, it requires a huge amount of effort. So a Nestle is very happy being a consumer company. They didn't go into anything else. Take a Pidilite. Now, they take the sensitivity and the humility to the next level, that I know the customer so well. What else can I do? How do I keep that customer? A Symphony, a Pidilite, an Asian Paints, a Nestle. How hard they work. So it's great pleasure. So they are not looking at adulation. They keep extending. So, these consumer companies, and, we got a master from America. He came and talked to us. He says, all my life, I have done only one sector, consumer sector. And he could talk about, he says, I cover about some 15 or 20 companies. That's all for last 35 years, I'm doing that only. So, you move away from adulation to excellence. You just go deeper, deeper, deeper. And adulation follows like a shadow. But that sadhana and bhavana, that becoming steady and working towards excellence, exerting, until that happens, Shuddha Dharma ka magic nahi hota hai. So it is all passing, 1 mahine kiya, 1 saal kiya, 5 saal kiya, usse kuch nahi hota hai. Day in, day out, ever, eternally, you have to do it.
I'm so glad you brought up that example of consumer companies. I started off my career as a consumer analyst. And even today, as an institutional sell-side broker, one of the first conversations I have with any fund manager is about consumer companies. And we, go ahead and talk about the inherent strength. In fact, while we're at it, Sanjeev Mehta says hello from HUL. He just dropped me a WhatsApp saying that he was not able to join in, so do convey his regards to you. So I said,
and likewise.
Just one more question before I open up for the question and answers. How much is enough when you are starting to, look at what you have achieved, whether in terms of wealth or, people in the stock market in terms of gains, at what point do you take that call that this is enough, and I should look at rationalizing my
Who
expectations?
is anybody else to tell you? You start becoming, steady, and let this vision come by yourself. Unless it comes by yourself, you will always be, double guessing. अरे यार मैंने उसकी बात सुन के कर लिया लेकिन थोड़ा और होना चाहिए था, मैं उसकी बात में फंस गया, या I got carried away when I did this. Be steady, nothing wrong. I think detachment is more important than not having anything. A sense of detachment, then you know whether the world is with you or no, doesn't matter. So Vinobaji in this Gita, he says something very beautiful. There's someone who continues his attachment but gives up the world. If he has only one langoti, he's attached to his langoti. The attachment to the whole world is now got contained in that one little house, one little, image, etc., etc. So I don't think anybody else should define enough. You should define what is enough. And when you define it, it will be enough. It will be absolutely enough. I know of one case where somebody just recognized that, yeah, what am I doing? Next day, he did not go back to his office to bring his things back. He said, I've given up, finished.
Wow.
That's what I mean that, when the clarity comes from within. Next day, he did not go to the office. He said, Joy Saltado, why am I bothered about it?
That's
so these things do happen. These 4 principles do happen.
For sure. I mean, it's quite something. So we have a few thoughts and questions coming in, sir. One of them is just thinking of on this issue that we were discussing of the Mahabharata, and it's a pretty long question, but I'll try and summarize it. It says, how do we basically get the mindset of Arjun? Because if we lose a little bit of money in the stock market, our mind starts wavering. How do you keep that focus that Arjun had, and the courage of conviction to stick with that stock even if you're losing money?
My friend, did anyone tell you that there is a rule in the world that you must win and you must make money every time? So Arjun is nothing but this Rijuta, no? He says that, okay, he is addressing to the world. Krishna is the world. And he says, world, I'm failing, I failed. I'm not able to face you. So I think that recognition that, I need to be smarter. I need to be clear in my thinking. And not everyone has the access to Krishna. So Arjuna learned, he earned the respect of Krishna by, through his whole life, by showing that excellence, right? Arjun showed the excellence to his teacher, right? He said that, okay, you got to pierce, are you a good archer? He passed the archery test. He asked him to go and do certain penance before the Mahabharata war. Arjun went, left his family and went and became a Kirata Arjuneya. So there are so many stories. What sort of effort have you made to really think that, I deserve that? So I think the stock market is such a spoiled spot. It's a casino for most people, those who think that, it is here to make money. It is only to give you a reference and to teach you the best possible lessons that there are in the world to learn.
Interesting. There is one very interesting thought that's come through, because I think somebody in our audience has actually read the version of Gita that you're talking about. Is actually asking you to recommend some other books about self-discovery. I think he's probably looking at a lot of the books that you're sitting in front of in your library behind you. So he's asking you to suggest maybe 2 or 3 other books about becoming a better person apart from the adapted the version of Gita that you spoke about.
Yeah, so I think reading, if you're who reads Hindi, there is this book called Nirmal Dhara Dharm Ki by Satyanarayan Goenka, a very simple book. And it's also the Noble Flow of Dharma, a book by him. Then I think Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman is a fantastic book to read. 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Harari is a fabulous book to read. Well, I think it's an endless list. Maybe I'll send you a list of books spoken in this manner. Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. I can't recommend enough, reading that autobiography. I think if you read a couple of books, there is this book, Hriday Gufa Ki Or by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. So the journey to, within, extraordinary book. And go and do a Vipassana course, those 10 days will do a world of good. What a 10,000 books will not teach you, those 10 days will teach you.
Incidentally, while you were answering that, somebody has thrown in another question as to when we can expect a book on your life, either a biography or an autobiography. You're planning to pen some thoughts
I
down?
hope one day my life is worthwhile to be written about and it is useful to people. So you will have to wait a while, my friends.
Incidentally, you were there at the book launch of one of our promoters. Dilipji had written a book on health and you were inaugurating that. So maybe at some stage, we look forward to a book from you as well.
I don't see that coming soon.
Well, you're still young. You have a long way to go.
Yeah.
One of the other thoughts coming in are, according to you, for an average citizen, what are our duties towards society? How do we pay back?
So, to recognize that what is this democratic contract? When we appoint a government and the government appoints its own people like officers or judges and so on and so forth, what is the arrangement? Do you think about it? If you had a servant who doesn't perform the task, you will try and get another servant. But if you find that another servant also doesn't perform the task, will you keep your house dirty? Will you keep your house unsafe? Or you will worry about it? Or will you supervise your servants and still make sure that, they perform better? I think we must first wake up to this reality that if the government, our governance has a deficit, we got to do something about it. It is our country, it is not their country. हम तो बोले ये सरकार का काम है, सरकार ने नहीं किया तो घर डूब गया तो डूब गया. मेरी सड़क गंदी है तो गंदी है, टूटी हुई है तो टूटी हुई है. That's not how it works. So the first is to wake up. The moment you do that, then you see, first it may begin with charity. Like, I think it's been extraordinary to see how Indians have gone out and, tried to help the community in Corona times. But some people have gone further. They said, oh, not only can we give food, can we create employment? Can we create, give them some mental relief? Can we give medical relief? Can we help the government by supplementing its effort? Mm-hmm. So, for example, I'm involved with a group where we recognize that the government has, serious shortfall of medical support. So can we supplement it? Can we get our doctors? Because, they cannot reach all doctors. So can we? So we formed a group. And this group, we have reached out to 1.6 million patients around the country. So you can organize yourself in many ways. So I think whatever little you can do around you, based on your competence and convenience, is fine. Just being a good citizen, being a compliant citizen is also helping the country. But until all citizens become what we call actisans, alert, informed, and active citizens, our governance will always have shortfall because the structure of the constitution, structure of our government, by their design, have complexity, have inconsistency, have incompetence, have non-transparency. There are so many problems which you can't solve. So if you wait for all of them to still give you good governance, well, I doubt your intelligence. Mm-hmm. So I think we got to take small steps and become very active if we want a good future for ourselves. You become a volunteer for Desh Apnaye Foundation, go to deshapnaye.org, we'll give you a lot more guidance.
Well, that's interesting. I hope the participant has taken note of that. There are some questions with respect to India and the road forward. So let me just try.
I'd like, so we can change the topic a little. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me tie this into a point that you raised about 1991 also, and given where we are. Now, there is an issue with China, and it's a very real issue. Do you think that we are at some sort of an inflection point? There is a lot of talk about Chinese manufacturing moving to India. The government probably trying to facilitate the same. There is a product-linked incentive scheme that has been announced to the domestic manufacturers. How material do you think is this an opportunity? I mean, in parts, the government of India is also talking about what's happening as being a quasi 1991 movement, and this could probably propel us to the next level. What are your thoughts on all of this?
So, beginning with the last point that, do we have an opportunity to do something dramatic? I had given one interview where I talked about this black swan event can become, if not a white swan, at least a gray swan, and even probably a white swan. Mm-hmm. But do you see the signs of it happening? Very frankly, I'm not seeing those signs. But, well, if it can happen, it'll be fantastic. I think we have seen some small, few rays of light and hope in the agricultural reform, where something bold was done. It is politically sensitive, but yet something was done. If we can do more of that, I think it is the simplest thing to beat China would be to become economically more powerful than China, to adopt what China did. So I think India is a fantastic opportunity. As to China, think about it this way, that if you look at the history of, modern history, last 500,000 years, England kind of, was a dominant force for maybe 50 or 100 years at most. Mm-hmm. At 1757 or 1857, India tried to push back from 1857 to say 1925, and then Germany started shaking them, America started to come up, Japan started to come up, but they were a dominant force. China has not become a dominant force at all. They did brilliantly in the last 40 years, starting from 1978, and Deng Xiaoping adopted what we have been shunning. China adopted profit, we have been shunning profit. The share of profits in our country is some 60-year low as a percentage of GDP, 60-year low. We are in serious difficulty. And China, one single word that created China was, they said profit is allowed. And the Chinese enterprise just blossomed and blossomed and blossomed. So I think China did brilliantly, but China is a closed country. It does not enjoy the empathy that only one country enjoyed for a long, long time, and that was America. America has enjoyed popularity in the world for a long time because America is unique because it allows access to foreigners. It still has a lot of liberal principles which other countries didn't have. England wanted to rule over others. Germany wanted to rule over others. China has created a feeling that it wants to dominate others. So China is different. So only America has been able to deal with counter forces better than anybody else in history. So if you think about it, that Japan was a dominant force in the early part of the 20th century. They were pushed back. Then they joined the war in the Second World War. They were pushed back. Germany was pushed back. England got pushed back. Russia got pushed back. Japan got pushed back a second time in the 80s, right? The Americans used to say, oh, Japan is going to take over the world. How they, went after Japan. First they went after Russia, then they went after Japan. Now they're going after China. And China has a lot of the non-democratic features which are making it easier for them to create an atmosphere. I don't think India and China will have a war. I don't think both of us can afford it. This war can easily become a world war. We are two nuclear powers and people have started aligning already. So I think you're going to see saber rattling. You're going to see the China blah, blah, blah until the presidential election gets over in the US. In the meantime, I think all of us have to think, how do we use this opportunity of growing at 10% per annum for the next 8, 10, 12 years? You start with 5, 7%, you open up everything. Let us all work hard. 8-hour, shift should become 12 hours, 14 hours. Let's all work very hard like the Chinese did for 10 years. We will be the best news for the world, not only for ourselves.
Well, you led me into the next question. And I'm sorry that we're diverting away from the subject at hand, but if Vallabh Bhanshali was Finance Minister of India today, since you spoke about 10% growth, you spoke about profit to GDP being at a 6-decade low, which is which is fair enough. And, I think there's a lot that went into it. I mean, ever since, you had a lot of reforms that were thrown at corporate India, right from demonetization to GST, RERA, NCLT, IBC, and you had all of this in a very protracted period of time. And, before you recovered from one, you had another hit you. So, the journey to 10% growth again, what is your roadmap? What's your blueprint?
See, I did capital markets. Capital markets was about, once you show there's a profit opportunity, you don't know where the worms will come out of woodwork from. They'll come out from all over. 1,000 ships were launched, right? When we launched Infosys and Narayan Murthy happened to the country. Narayan happened to the economic reforms. Without Narayan Murthy economic reforms, I don't know how well they would have played out, because he became a great exemplar of liberal. So once I create this atmosphere that, we mean business, you do legitimate business, we'll give you every possible help. Once I create that, if China, right, after cultural revolution, when they destroyed their intellectual capital, when they never had too much enterprise, those people suddenly, who you are used to wearing, or everyone wearing blue and everywhere one color, we couldn't imagine China could do this. One man saying it doesn't matter what the color of the cat is, as long as it catches mice, Deng Xiaoping. He just brought out all the culture of China's history and let loose people and say, support them. I will do the same. If I do the same, this country has the most amazing mercantile history, most mercantile brains, super mathematical geniuses in this country. We have now had, over the last 30 years or so, since 1991 economic reforms and since Narayan Murthy, we have had so many wonderful companies with great governance. We have had our share of, bad ones. But, from a Radhakishan Damani to a Marico to an, Info Edge and Sanjeev Bajaj now, we have had so many of these wonderful companies. Hundreds will follow. Create a, just respect them. Businessman is wanting respect in this country. Profit comes after meeting all the liabilities. Our people don't understand. Profit comes last. The moment our government understands, oh, we did the worst thing possible because profit was servicing the rent, interest, salaries, investment, and whatnot. Once you throw profit out, you have thrown everything out. I'll bring profit back. Once I bring profit back, my currency will appreciate. I want my currency to appreciate, but it does not appreciate in isolation. Switzerland, England, whatever hard currencies are in the context of governance, in the context of freedom. It's a totally different topic. I had given one talk for one of the groups that, capitalism is the only system in the world and why it is so noble. So I won't get into it, but it is very simple that make profit respectable. I just punish. I will take chances with people that, okay, instead of thinking that everyone is a crook, I will punish some crooks. Some crooks will go unpunished. That happens irrespective. Even, whatever noise you make, still crooks go unpunished. So I don't want to punish every innocent person in the fear that, some crooks will get away. That's all. Just change that. Just flip that around. India will be magic.
You started off your previous answer by saying you're a capital market person. What do you think is the outlook for that industry? We've not seen a plethora of IPOs like we saw, say, between 2005 and 8 on a consistent basis. The government of India itself is talking about doing some very big ticket IPOs. How do you see the capital market industry outlook from here in the context of the last two questions that I asked?
See, unless, we are going to reverse, if you're going to continue to punish profit the way it has got punished, then it's a different situation. Otherwise, capital markets have had long periods of, lulls in the past. In 1956, when the forward, markets were banned, we were we were a laggard for a long time. Then 1975, we had dividend freeze. And the markets didn't open for months together. So I have seen, all kinds of markets. So this current lull, capital market being down, etc., it doesn't bother me. As long as you're going to have free enterprise, capital markets outlook is just going to go up and down, but I think we'll come back. It's a simple demand and supply. if the government is sitting there to supply so much paper, and the institutions will be forced to buy any, some part of it, it's not the greatest of news. So I think we need profit to come back into fashion, and we need supply to be regulated somewhat. Capital markets will come back. I'm positive about Indian capital markets. And I think only thing I would like to, subject this to is what has been happening in the world. And that worries me, and I should talk about it. That, just as Einstein, when he was looking at the universal abstract physics, and he said, there is something missing, which came to be known as the goddamn particle, which became God particle, that, in his balance of energy and mass, he saw some factors. I won't get into that. So also, the capital market exists in a context, in a framework. That framework has government, it has central bank, it has enterprises, and it has the capital market as a marketplace where all these three have influences. So the central bank sets the benchmark for interest rate against which we set the EP, the P multiple, and so on. And the central bank has to be independent of the government. Now, since the last 10, 12 years, since the global financial crisis, all this has got jumbled up. The central bank is talking the same way as the government is talking, and the market mechanism for interest is just got destroyed, because countries that were in the big pigs and they were basket cases, 3 years after that they were raising perpetual bonds. I mean, nothing changed except all the central banking. So therefore, our fundamental understanding of what is money, what is leverage, what is borrowing, what is servicing, what are debt service ratios, etc., is all under serious meltdown. And some people think that because 2008 crisis was solved by this, that because central banks and the governments talked about it and the markets have come back a long way, this will go on for long. I want to, sir, I don't know when you want to stop, but there is one behavioral finance principle which we must remember very, very, very acutely, keenly, is called survivorship bias. Are you aware of survivorship bias?
Happy
that
to
when
learn.
something survives, right, we think, wow, this is brilliant. So right from in school days, we thought that this guy was a cheater, but he was able to pass. So a lot of people say, "कि तू बहुत smart है यार, तू तो cheat करके pass हो जाता है." And some people cheat and go on for a long time. And we think, well, this is a model. So in last 5 years in India, we saw several names about which people were suspect that ये तो मरेगा एक दिन, सब मर गए. But in the meantime, they did large amount of QIPs, they raised capital, they became very big, they won corporate governance awards and whatnot. So they have survived and we all clapped. So just now what is going on in the world on a grand scale is that we are leveraging. Leverage per se is not a problem, because civilization is the story of leverage, right? We moved from barter to money to, so we have been increasing money supply forever. So per se, that is not a problem. But this breakdown of the tension, the right tension, the relationship between central bank, government, independent markets, etc., that is a serious problem. So you must think very carefully about at least having some assets which are safe. You need to be a lot more cautious in investing now because of the breakdown of the very fundamental infrastructure.
Interesting. I know we had agreed for 60 minutes on this. I didn't realize you had already gone to 75. It's just been the nature of the conversation. It's always so insightful and such a pleasure to listen to you. And I think for everyone who's been on this broadcast, it's been one hell of a fascinating experience to just hear your thoughts. I must tell you, I'm just coming up on 10 years of the institutional desk here, and you are actually one of the reasons I decided to get into this business. Because right from the days I used to interview you to see the way the franchise you built up at ENAM, it's actually one of the considerations I did before I took this move from media.
You're very kind, Rahul.
No,
if there's something interesting, let's take a couple of more questions, but otherwise it's...
they are fairly politically sensitive, so I'm just trying to avoid them, to be very honest.
I'm okay with them. It depends upon my answer, right?
Okay, so how do you rate Prime Minister Modi's 6 years?
I think they are absolutely historic in the sense that we needed someone to do the difficult tasks.
Mm-hmm.
I think to do something like Section 370, to do the kind of reforms which people were not ready to touch, and to go right up to the agriculture reform I talked about. It's simply because someone has not been able to do everything that I wish does not take anything away from the extraordinary achievement. We talked about failures, we talked about weaknesses, we talked about humility. I think just as we look at ourselves human and accept our humanness, we should accept Prime Minister's humanness. But I think we haven't had a Prime Minister like him, hardworking, so committed to the country, and so desirous of taking our country forward for a long, long period of time. I rate him very, very highly.
Your thoughts on gold?
I think gold has become relevant. Gold has become relevant as I said, that when the markets fail to set prices, right? Interest is not, fairly set because it is being maneuvered. If interest is being maneuvered, P multiples are being maneuvered indirectly because there's so much money chasing just a few stocks. Nothing else has changed. Outlook has not changed. The prices have gone up. So some of it is recovery because there was a sharp fall, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the difficulty with gold is that it's not easy to own it. It's not easy to hold it. To buy it. But I think the first time in my life, in my career of 30, 40, 50 years, I tell people that, whatever you like to 1%, 2%, do hold some gold. And on some rainy day, it will give you some comfort. Think about it. The number of central banks own gold, right? And some central banks can't buy enough of it. The biggest buyer of gold is China.
Right.
US has got the largest gold reserve. So gold has some value. Why would they be owning it?
True that. Well, it's been a pleasure listening to you. I hope you enjoyed being on. I've tried to do the best I could from an anchor's perspective after doing this with you after almost 10 years, I think. But I hope you enjoyed being on, sir.
No, my pleasure to be a part of I'm a part of a bunk family in my mind. And so very happy to be here and happy to be with you, Rahul. You've been a fabulous, so sensitive and so kind anchor. Thank you
so
for your
much.
kindness.
So they haven't put it on chat, but I think on behalf of Kishorji and Dilipji also, I'd like to thank you for extending your time from the...
My pleasure, absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Stay safe, sir. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to have done this interaction. And hopefully I get a chance to see you soon in person once this issue is behind us.
Yeah, we have forgotten what it means to meet. But inshallah, very soon. Thank you very much for the opportunity. All my good wishes. Be positive. We'll be fantastic.
That's a very optimistic note to end it on. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhanshali. Pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.